Are you over 50 and feeling it? If you've been working out and watching what you eat, but still haven't been able to accomplish your fitness and weight loss goals, then today's show is dedicated to you. Our guest is going to tell us her secrets to help you increase energy, lose weight, and enjoy your best health ever in the second half of life. Welcome to C60 Health Connections, where we meet with leading experts who can help you elevate performance in all aspects of your life. Functional health coach, hormone balancing fitness expert, and Flipping 50 founder, Debra Atkinson, is with us today. Debra has helped over 250,000 women flip their second half with the vitality and energy they want. She's the best-selling author of You Still Got It, Girl, the After 50 Fitness Formula for Women, Navigating Fitness After 50, your GPS for choosing programs and professionals that you can trust, and Hot, Not Bothered. Debra hosts Flipping 50 TV and Flipping 50 podcast, and AARP top podcast for people over the age of 50. She's a frequent speaker and a TEDx presenter of Everything Women in Menopause Learned About Exercise May Be a Lie. She has 38 years full-time fitness experience, is an international fitness presenter for associations including the International Council on Active Aging, IDEA, NSCA, and Athletic Business and CanFit Pro. She's an American Council on Exercise subject matter expert and prior senior lecturer in kinesiology at Iowa State University. She is also the founder of Flipping50.com and the creator of Flipping Fitness Specialist Program for fitness professionals. She's a frequent contributor at HuffPost, ShareCare, and other featured outlets, and on the Education Advisory Board for medfit.org. My name is Jessica McNaughton, and I am the CEO at shopc60.com and C60 Purple Power. I'm a business executive with years of experience in corporate America, and for more than 20 years, I've been exploring various modalities in health, wellness, and spirituality. Now, before we get started today, any statements, products, or topics discussed have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. Any products or modalities that we discuss are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, mitigate, or prevent any disease. Debra, so great to see you today. Thank you so much for joining us.
You too. I'm so glad to be here. I'm a huge fan of C60, as you know.
Well, we're so glad to have connected with you, and I just cannot wait to have this conversation. Will you tell our audience a little bit about your background and how you came to discover these secrets that are especially critical for women over the age of 50 as it relates to fitness and weight loss, energy, all that kind of good stuff?
Well, as so often is true, it often happens from the school of hard knocks. You know that school, right? And yet I got lucky. So I will say that you heard 38 years in the fitness industry. Well, right at about 30, I quit. I quit things I loved. I didn't leave because I was unhappy. It was a hard decision because I love teaching at the university. I love the involvement with students. It was new for them, and that kept it new for me. And I also loved being personal training director and working one-on-one with still a handful of clients at that time. But I felt like I'm either going to settle in, stay very comfortable here, or I'm going to take the responsibility of having more reach and getting the right message out to more people. And I felt like I need to do this. My son's going away to college. He's going to get a life. They frown on parents going to college with their kids. And I knew he wouldn't go for that. So I was like, now's the time. I'm going to do this. And then I panicked. And, I was like, what am I doing? I'm going to start paying college tuition in 8 months. I have no revenue coming in. I'm planning to build this cool thing, but I have no idea if it's really going to work. So there was this, it had to work. I was all in, I was totally in. And as is true with fitness professionals, so very often we're the overachievers. So if we're teaching classes, a couple of classes a day, we also do our workouts separately and in addition to that, because we will say, well, that's not my workout, and so we're used to doing more. We are the epitome of more is better. And someone who started their career in 1984, very true. It's what got in here is the more you do, the more fit you'll be. So I was that person. And when I stopped, and here I am in front of a computer beginning to build a digital business and reach customers that way, because I knew it had more potential. I had no idea, none, what I was doing. It wasn't post-pandemic when there was more tools for more people who needed to do that also. I kind of fumbled through this, taking a lot of courses, doing a lot of learning, doing a lot of trial and error. So I really kind of locked myself ball and chain to the computer for 14 to 16 hours a day. And I know there were days that I didn't get out of my pajamas. And so what was hours a day of exercise became about 20 minutes a day. That was very typical. So I began to make it count. I would do a little interval training or I would do a short weight workout, but I made it count while I was doing it. Or I had an old English sheepdog, not necessarily a go-getter, but I had to take him around the block. And that was it. And yet I looked up, and after working on this business and starting to see myself in videos, I was like, just wait a minute. I'm fitter, I'm stronger, I'm leaner. And actually I'm getting compliments from people like, what are you doing? And this was it. And I said, okay, wait a minute. Is this just me, or is this bigger than me? And I started to look at this flies against everything I've been taught and have been teaching for 15 years at the university level. So I need to know, do I need to fix something that I've done here, or what is it? So that's when I began to realize 39% of all sports medicine and exercise research actually features women. And I think we all might say, well, okay, we've had worse odds, in things, in 60-40, is that bad? But when you consider women go through, just on average, 7 hormonal changes in their lives, men do not, right? And they go through puberty, and then when they taper later in life, it comes down the hill slowly, not suddenly, like menopause. Every one of our hormonal transitions requires a unique exercise prescription. So if we take that 39% and say, let's divide it by those 7 phases that maybe not all women go through, but we also want to account for some women go through them multiple times, pregnancy, right, and recovery. There's less than about 6% if we said it's distributed evenly. Of course it's not, but that's very little research for you or for me in the one moment we're in right now. So if we've been exercising all this time with promises and haven't known to ask, was that built based on research on women just like me with the hormone profile I have right now? We've been gambling, and nobody would go to Vegas with those odds. I mean, it's not a good setup for us. So we've got to really start demanding to know, even if you're working one-on-one with a trainer. And I would say that I know that because I've sat on all sides of the desk. I've trained them in the university. I have written the items that base certification exams for trainers. I've hired, fired, and trained them. And I know what they know. But I know they, until very recently, and even now a select few, haven't been considering hormones. We consider knees and hips and joints, and we consider history, but we don't ask about hormones. And even if they did, right now, many trainers wouldn't know what to do with the answers. So it's become my mission to help educate women on what they need so that they can demand it, to provide it myself. But let's face it, one woman can't do the job. We need more people, more trainers, more health coaches who know this. And so I want to also help them do, justice to women and build their own businesses as well.
That's awesome. So, will you tell us what are the 7 phases? I think many of us out there have no idea. This is like the first time we've even heard this type of language around 7 phases of, hormone cycles or changes that we go through in our life.
Yeah, such a great question. And I may even embellish on it, because we can sometimes now say, with fertility problems, that actually adds another one that we hadn't accounted for when we sat down with a group of friends who, serve women at all different stages. And we said, let's lay this out. That's another one. So the very first one is puberty. So when we're talking about, ideally, maybe we should mention the ideal time. Where does this happen? Junior high and high school, ideally, but unfortunately, we're seeing, because of the obesity problem, we're seeing this happen in 3rd grade. That's exactly not what we want. But during that time of puberty, we want to see young women, adolescents, getting impact kinds of exercise, because they've still got a window until they're about 30 to work on bone density. And while they're doing that, encouraged to do certain activities that will support them, they're also going to build their confidence. And body confidence is so very important. We don't want to lose that time when a little girl says, watch how fast I can run and see how strong I am, because very soon, too many are thinking, I don't want to run. I don't want to do that. I don't want anybody watching me because I'm too fat, or I'm too slow, or I'm too something. And we gotta try to keep that strong warrior attitude in our young girls, and exposing them to more things where they feel it physically will help them think it mentally their whole lives. So that's a big one.
So I want to ask you a quick question on that real quick. So just for our listeners out there who are, raising young, confident young women, or they'd like to be, will you just define what those impact exercises are, in case there's people that don't know what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. So things like, playing basketball and soccer. So if it's a sporting interested kind of young gal, those things are all wonderful. When you think about that sport, either of those, there are zigzags, there's lateral movement, there's forward, there's backward movement, and all of that will impact the bone and the force to the bone differently, so that you're getting that from 360. Other kids might prefer doing things alone, which is perfectly fine. So jump rope, hopscotch, getting them to get involved in activities that they love. But, jumping off of a chair to the floor is going to provide more impact than little hops and skips. So be thinking, what has the bigger impact, and what can I do with them or encourage? Swimming, for instance, is a wonderful sport. However, it's great for muscle, not for bone, because we remove gravity, so they're not getting that. A comparison of, say, gymnastics to swimming in young girls, when we look at what happens to them later, we know that gymnasts have far better bone density. Now, there may be an argument that that's more risky, or, a little bit more injury prone. And of course, it's only as good as your coach, right, is. But there's definitely, room for, find something on that continuum that lends itself toward, if they love swimming, great. Let's get them strength training so that they can swim better. That'll be a motivating factor for them. And or get them playing other things casually, even in the driveway, playing basketball, reaching up for a layup, coming down, that landing is the beneficial piece.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for explaining that. So we've got puberty. What's our next phase?
The next phase is really the young adulthood, not trying to get pregnant, right? So trying to keep themselves from getting pregnant. But that point where you've got a late teen, you've got an early 20 something to late 20s, and that can go for as long or as little as any woman wants. But during that period, we probably still have quite a bit of body confidence, maybe not as much as when we were 7, right? And screaming, watch me, watch me. But it's still important to get a woman into the weight room to start lifting weights when she's feeling pretty good about her body. And I'm seeing more and more of it. So although I create home exercise programs, I go to the gym because sometimes Debra alone with Debra too much is not a good thing. So when I'm watching other women, it's such a refreshing thing to see a lot of young women on the weight room side of things, not just in the cardio. It's really a great statement for what's going to be true of us and our health in 20 and 30 years. When women are going through menopause, we may see less risk of bone density issues. So getting in the weight room, making sure we're portraying the language of strength and being strong and muscle tone, not so much praising just pretty or thin. And it's hard not to do that. It is a default. We tend to compliment somebody on, you look so good, but there's an intentionality behind it that often means you look like you've lost weight. And we have to really be careful, because that's a very vulnerable time for young women.
Great point. What's our third phase or our third change?
Yeah. So the third one that we didn't include originally would be, fertility issues. So, or we're talking prenatal.
Okay.
During that, either we're pregnant or we're struggling with hormonal issues, because that provides a challenge all its own. It changes a woman's natural regular cycle to something else. So there is course correction that needs to happen there as well. And, your exercise program that you're used to doing may not be a great fit for you. You're going to have to navigate the waters and see how you feel. And remember, we're supposed to feel good from exercise. I think sometimes we just take this, here's the chart, here's what it says in my app, I'm supposed to be doing this. And we don't stop to think often enough, why am I doing this, right? It's to feel good, to feel more energy to do life, not so much just to accomplish this check mark on box that I did that one. Yeah.
So do you typically categorize that third phase as it relates to your clients and the people that you work with? Is that age range somewhere late 20s through early 40s, or is it mostly concentrated in your 30s?
Jessica, I think we're in uncharted waters right now.
Yeah.
So, I've got friends who were 48 and 50 and contemplating, am I done or am I not done? They've had twins, right? And I think, who I mean, but, that's probably atypical, but I would say we're seeing women almost bring together postpartum and perimenopause. They're like overlapping. So it can be mid 40s where we're still in that prenatal and postpartum. So we're kind of getting ahead, but that's the next stage, obviously. Yeah.
Okay. And what types of exercises are appropriate for the phase or the change 3 group, where whether you've been pregnant and you aren't anymore, or you're trying to get pregnant, or you're struggling with fertility issues, like what are the best kind of supportive exercises for that group of women?
Great question. So traditionally, if you go way back and you learned that, you may be trying to pass on advice that is no longer true. So I just want to be sure that things have changed and the science has changed, and we no longer treat women, unless they're high risk, as delicate, so you can continue what you've been doing. And for a lot of women and a lot of women's doctors, that the belief is that's going to actually help you have a healthier pregnancy, mentally and physically, and that's good for the baby as well. So continuing what you're doing, and of course, continuing to listen, as you grow in girth and in time, I mean, you're creating human life. So that can be a job that's fatiguing, right? So you may require more recovery, a little bit more sleep, maybe less intensity, but we're a little less concerned at this point about elevating a heart rate beyond a certain point. There used to be a very strict rule, less so. And the more fit you are, it's more what's your talk test and how comfortable are you in working hard. So you would never want to take an Olympic athlete and say, you can't do anything. You need to just walk. That would be detrimental to her mental or physical health. So it's got to be relative to what's been true for you. But the other truth is that we used to say, don't start anything new. Don't start anything new in pregnancy. But we would much rather have you start a walking program, even a gentle weight training program with the appropriate starting point, the appropriate progression. It's still a reasonable thing to do, and it's going to prepare you for changes in your posture, lower back fatigue, upper back fatigue that can happen as a woman's pregnancy continues, can be lessened or reduced. Any hip issues. We want to start the later in the pregnancy a woman is we want to start taking a pause because of the relaxin hormone that makes it easier for her to have the baby. That also makes the joints have a little more laxicity, and we want to be cautious adding too much weight or too much high impact. But for the most part, you can continue what you're used to, and your body will tell you. When you're 8 months pregnant, it's going to take far less to elevate your heart rate than it did 2 months pregnant.
That makes sense. So what is the fourth phase or the fourth change?
So postpartum, of course. So, and that happens, when you've had the baby, or if there's been a conclusion to the pregnancy that otherwise wasn't planned, but otherwise there is a recovery that needs to happen. And this is probably the one area that is very like any other stage. And for both genders, we don't respect recovery. And women tend to want their pre-baby body back really quickly. And this is where, you can cause problems, and you still have that relaxin hormone in your body surging for several months. So coming back too soon can cause laxicity in your joints and ligaments that aren't quite ready for the high impact that between the ears you think you are. So starting back, but gently, progressively lower impact things. Getting your heart rate up is not a problem, but it's the taking care of your joints, and then also paying good attention to, how are you feeling mentally and physically? We've all heard of postpartum depression. The exercise can be super helpful for that, but that can also generally be tied to lower adrenals and adrenal fatigue, because most likely, unless you got one that I did not get, your baby's not sleeping through the night right away. And that means neither are you, unless you're a very lucky woman. So, we need sleep to fully recover. Your body's just been through trauma. So you want to respect what's happened, allow yourself to heal, and pay attention to your energy. And a big piece of that is also nutrition. So especially for those who are breastfeeding, but regardless of whether you are or you aren't, you've got what your body needs. You may have what you need for the breastfeeding, in addition to what you need for the extra exercise. So you need to stay on top of how often and how much do I need to eat in order to keep up with this, because losing that weight too quickly can backfire on a woman.
What, and specifically, like how so?
Well, by the fatigue, you run yourself down and into a hole, and you just got a job that's going to last for 18 or more years, right? So you're 24/7 on this one.
Yeah.
And we've really got to watch for, the fatigue that can happen because you're not recovering from the sleep and depleting micronutrients. So remembering that when you're pregnant, your body is always going to default to, we're going to give it to the baby first. So it may not show up right away, but long-term micronutrient deficiencies sometimes show up postpartum and maybe the first year or two of a child's life. Mom still is kind of catching up from pregnancy. So looking at, all the pieces, not just the exercise, but the exercise then is kind of running on fuel that may not be there.
That's such valuable advice and feedback. Thank you for that. Okay, so what's number 5?
So number 5 is perimenopause. Yeah. So it's every woman is going to go through menopause. So it's the first stage. I will divide them up into three phases, honestly, although we all know that menopause is really a blip on the screen. Like today you hit 12 months from your last period. Congratulations. You just went through the door. You're in postmenopause. I like to break it up. And primarily I've done this so that when I'm talking to health coaches, I'm talking to personal trainers, they realize that we've got, even in perimenopause, kind of an early stage, and then we've got a later stage. And in the later stage, things become a little bit more volatile for a higher percentage of women. Some women never really know they're in perimenopause. It doesn't phase them very much at all until just at the very tail end. And so that latter part we call, later stage perimenopause, but I like to divide that last couple of years of perimenopause, the first 2 years of postmenopause, as that's really menopause in the transition, because what happens there is more dramatic than any other time. We're really seeing that steeper decline of estrogen. And when we have that happen, we're seeing the increase of cortisol. It's kind of as your body's answer to, oh, you're going to do that, I'm going to do this. So we're going to try to keep things in balance, suggesting that cortisol might be used to create estrogen. Well, it's a pretty ineffective way to do it, but the damage is there. So when we're more susceptible to negative effects of stress, therefore cortisol, we're more likely to store body fat than we are to burn it. And we're less likely to respond really well to the heavy and the harder and more exercise must be better mandate or dogma we learned 30 or 40 years ago, and maybe even less than that. So we still have some course correction to do in terms of teaching what really, a proper exercise formula looks like for each stage of the game for women. But we're susceptible to rapid or accelerated muscle and bone loss during that period of time. And that's when, during the pandemic, I began to really think about all those women who were relying on a gym, suddenly didn't have one. And we have a global dumbbell shortage. Who would have predicted that, right?
That was crazy. Yeah. Because you try to buy them so you can get them at your house, and then you can't get them anywhere. It was crazy. Yeah.
So there are a lot of women, I think, who really needed it, who relied on maybe an instructor, a trainer, a class, a community somewhere they went to and didn't have it, then didn't have a way or a means to exercise at home, or wouldn't have known necessarily what to do safely. For a while, there was a big gap. To those women right there, they're probably more at risk, or let's just say this way, more in need of, let's pay attention right now and let's mitigate any losses that we did have so we can catch back up, make sure we're strong, both in muscle and in bone for the next 30 or 40 years.
That makes sense. I want to take a step back really quick just to make sure I understand. So in the 5th phase, the perimenopause, which you've broken into the 3 phases, kind of early, mid, and then the later phase, which goes right into menopause, which I'm assuming is the 6th stage, is menopause or postmenopause. Okay. In the 5th phase, so again, this is just general. It could start in your mid 30s. It could go into your mid 50s, but it's that period kind of late 30s through 40s to early 50s where you're leading up to menopause. What's important to know about exercise and the amount of exercise? Because I'm under the impression, correct me if I'm wrong, that during this phase, we start losing bone and muscle mass. Is that true?
It will begin, yes. And most women at this point either don't really notice it or have signs and symptoms that are hard to connect to. Oh, this is me in perimenopause. This is what this looks like. Because I mean, nobody knocks on the door and says, here I am, right? And so you may have the common signs. You have hot flashes or night sweats, right? But if just all of a sudden you start not to be able to lose weight, doing the things that used to work, or you start to see a little bit more belly fat and just changing of where you're storing fat that you hadn't seen before, or maybe you have a sleepless night or two, that's unusual for you. Right away, I don't think it dawns on every woman just with that one or two things. It's just like, you can look back and say, oh, do you know when that was happening? I bet that was this. And so no woman is to blame. I think the more we talk about it, women in their 30s will know a little bit more of what to expect. And if I begin to see these different signs, even though they may not be the same one, but if I see them more frequently, closer together, they become more intense, I'm going to pay a little bit more attention to what I want to do. So absolutely. One of the key things that we're hearing from science now is that key time, if you're not, to start exercising correctly, strength training being the top on your priority list, is in perimenopause, and learning how to do it intensely. So I know we've talked a little bit about maybe not needing it to be so intense, but we do need a certain intensity. We just need not a lot of it. We just need this much. And then we need to rest between it and do it again this much, one or two times during a week, and we're good. We're gold. But we tend to do more, try to get more in. I'll feel better if I do that. And we need to get this one right.
I think we've been programmed to think that more is better. And I think that's part of the problem. Like, we've all been taught that. And so, like you said, 1 or 2 days of kind of high intensity during this period. But I think a lot of people would think, no, I need 3 to 5 days. And you're saying that's just not true anymore.
Yeah. I will say this, and I will say this because I think I can. So I can say this because this is me. So maybe what I should say is, what's been true for me, who likes to over exercise, is that I realized that I probably didn't have really good stress coping skills. I had one thing in my toolbox, and that was exercise.
Yeah.
And so learning that maybe just a walk outdoors or a phone call to a friend or other things were better or just as good, and a way to get more balance in life. I think that's a good sign for a lot of people. And unfortunately, or fortunately, it tends to be those of us who are hard driven, we're disciplined, we do the work, we're type A's, and we'll do this. And we tend to want to do a tangible thing versus an intangible thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, once we get to stage 6, menopause or postmenopause, then it sounds like we don't need that intensity with such frequency anymore. Is that correct?
We need intensity, but we need it at a smaller frequency than we ever did before in our lives. Yes. So the older you get, the more you need intensity compared to any other time in your life. So this is the turnaround. This is the flip for everybody. We've thought, okay, I'm older. So I just read the other day, and this made me crazy. So I just read this and I was like, what year was this published? And I hope it was 1920, but it wasn't. It was 2020. And it said So what's really good for women is walking and, doing this and encouraging exercise. But the very last line said, except you want to be careful about exercising too intensely because that can be bad for older women. And I was like, no, really? And we need to get breathless. We need to pick up heavy weights that we find the last few repetitions we really wonder if we're going to be able to do. We need those things as the stimulus for getting stronger, for maintaining what we call muscle protein synthesis. That means we're going to retain our muscle, not only muscle mass for metabolism, but muscle strength, muscle endurance, so that we can be independent people for as long as we want to. Because I think that's one of the number one fears we all have is somebody's going to have to take care of us.
Yeah, and nobody really, I think, is looking forward to that experience of being helpless and needing someone to help you with just basic daily movements. So talk to us about the last or the seventh stage that women go through with their hormonal changes.
Yeah, seventh stage is really just postmenopause. And it is kind of that, once you've transitioned into menopause and you are there, this one though is till death do us part. We're in postmenopause. I think a lot of people, when I first started writing this and wrote, you still got it, girl. Somebody was saying, do I still need this hormone balancing exercise? Because I'm way past that. And I'm like, yep, till death do you part, because we're still being affected by the hormonal changes that occurred. And we still always will have hormones to deal with. So the cortisol always going to be there. The insulin, which can become problematic later in life, also always going to be there. And we will, and many women will have more estrogen, testosterone, progesterone later in life because they're choosing hormone therapy. And that's a whole, other topic, whether you do or whether you don't. I think the goal is lifestyle habits. Still, you want to be, how are you eating? How are you sleeping? Prioritizing sleep. How are you exercising? And what's the integrated result that's having on you?
Thank you so much for taking us on that tour. So let's talk about it. How do you encourage women to flip 50? What's it all about, Debra?
The biggest piece is the 6 inches between your ears first, because if we
Okay.
expect to age really well, it's going to be hard to choose to take the actions or change our habits that will help us do it. If we expect that a part of getting older is gaining weight or getting a higher percent of body fat or not being able to do certain things anymore, I believe that's what we'll get. And I think we've got examples now in people aging very differently than we've ever seen it, but they're anomalies. So you and I talk about it. It's like, it's such a great role model. I'm interviewing somebody this afternoon who's 93, who did a TEDx talk when she was 87. And I mean, I'm pretty sure thinking about, will I still be putting myself on podcasts at 93 and thinking there's the bar just going up right now, right?
Right. She just changed the game for all of us.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, I mean, so amazing. But I think what's really the goal is the day when we're not talking about that being a big deal because she's 93, but because of what she's coming on to talk about, right?
Yeah.
So we want to all kind of be in that. Well, of course you can. If you want to do that, that'll be you if you're planning for that.
So mindset number one, just to be really clear about what your own personal expectations are for aging, whether or not you're going to buy into, I'm going to get older, I'm going to get chubbier, I'm going to, da 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 da, my hair is going to, go gray or fall out. Or if you say, no, I'm going to go as slow as possible and be as healthy as I can throughout every single stage of life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's, I've looked at anti-aging and kind of swayed the way of, I don't use that word or that term, I use pro-aging. but I've really begun to even look at, am I ageist? And I'm starting to examine every way I say something and trying to catch and be aware of, is there any way that I put a nuance in here where I'm favoring youth? Because when you're favoring youth, you're turning away from the fact that we are all getting older, but we have to make that a sexier thing somehow, because we're not going to get out of this one without doing that.
Yep. I like your book, Hot, Not Bothered. I think that's a great place to start.
Truth. Yeah, true. So it's definitely that. And then so I have to make a little convergence with we want to encourage more people to exercise. And in the fitness industry, I think we've made it hard because we amongst ourselves confuse. There's a lot of information out there, and one expert is saying this and another expert is saying that. And that's a little truth, I think, in every industry. But especially true when you're choosing exercise. I think it's easy for people to sit in the middle of the room and spin when they're being told to exercise this way. No, exercise that way. No, exercise another way. And trends and fads come and go pretty quickly. So I'm all for, let's find movement that you enjoy. And I had this discussion with the infamous Dr. John Gray on my podcast. And he was talking about, it's really important that you find something you enjoy. And I said, wait. Okay, so this is me interrupting John Gray, but I need to ask you, we need strong muscles. We need strong bones to age really well. How do you bring together these two things? Because if somebody loves to stand up paddleboard or to do yoga, that alone will not help their muscle and their bone for longevity. I said, how are we going to bring these two things together? He said, no, you're absolutely right. He said, I absolutely hate lifting weights. I said, I'm going to have to edit that. but he said, what I do is I hire a trainer that I do enjoy going to see so that I make sure I do it. And that, I think, we have to sometimes take this spoonful of medicine, right, with something we do enjoy. So finding a friend, finding a reward you look forward to, preferably not cake, finding music, things that make it more enjoyable. And that is how to start. I think the biggest thing for anybody who's looking to restart, or what they're doing right now isn't working, is to remember that the best motivation comes from simply feeling good, feels good. So if you can start long enough, commit long enough so that you can begin to turn the corner and feel good, then the need for motivation goes away. It's a need for discipline when you start, but most of us run to pleasure. So if you're feeling good, it would be hard to leave that behind.
That makes sense. What else besides mindset and exercise is really important in this equation for, I call it healthy aging?
Yes, sleep. So recovery.
Yes.
Sleep is the king, queen, prince, and princess of recovery, but all of it, so very related. So the time between your workout and your workout, be an active person, but not necessarily thinking I'm going to get more workouts this week, because that would be the best. But I think becoming somebody who moves more is really important. And recovery is probably the most undervalued component of fitness ever. So we never, especially in America, reward people for going on vacation. We reward people when they say, oh, I got in early to work, or I stayed late to work, or I got this done and that done, and I'm so productive. And, it's like we're looking for brownie badges doing things like that. And, if you have ever made an offhanded remark, and I've done this, where, somebody will say, I went on vacation or I went on this trip, and I'm like, I'd like your life I mean, what we did is kind of degraded the value of they should go on vacation. That means they're probably more productive and happier and healthier when they come back. And we all need to, I think, reward each other and encourage each other to take the breaks.
I appreciate that so much. What else after sleep and recovery? Is there anything else in this secret equation?
Well, in recovery, so nutrition is a big piece of this,
Yep.
And we need more protein than we ever have before in our lives. I think all ages and stages and both genders, this is true for us. But as we age, something called muscle protein synthesis begins to dwindle right along with other hormones, right? But muscle protein synthesis is our ability to use for our bodies, our muscle, our bone, the protein that we're ingesting for our good. So it's like our use of that is far less or far reduced. We need more and more protein than if we're going to take in a certain lower percentage of it. And we really want to be conscious of making that the highest quality protein possible. So it's got all of the essential amino acids in it. And when someone is exercising and really doing all the right things and even recovering and comes to me and says, I'm not gaining lean muscle or I'm not losing weight, and that's the first place I'll go, is asking, tell me a little bit about your diet from morning to night. What's that look like?
That's great. And then what are your thoughts around supplements or additional things that you should do, vitamins, minerals, nutrients that are really critical for women over the age of 50?
It's a tricky topic for women at this age because we went through, and I think a lot of us feel we were very experimental. It's like we started, probably all of us grew up like a vitamin and orange juice for breakfast, right? And then it was like, that's just a waste. You're flushing that down the toilet. So forget it. It's not even worth it. And we all kind of went through this. Okay, I'm done. And I think we are swinging back to the other side. We don't have the quality of the soil, which means we don't have the quality in the vegetables. Even the organics are not as high quality. We're not getting all the micronutrients. And the only way to really do that, and I promise you, nobody I ever worked with in 38 years says, Debra, I just love to take my supplements. Never, ever heard it. But I think we need it. And if I showed you my cabinet, you'd be like, that's a pharmacy. That's not a cabinet. And I've heard that, I believe, from my family members. But there's just certain things. And I think the best way is test, don't guess, especially if you find I can't comply with this. I can't put this through my head. You think of yourself as a car driving down the road. You take your car in for a tune-up, and if they gave you a shoebox full of extra parts and said, we couldn't find where these went back, so just hang on to them and we'll take a look at that next time you come in, you would never drive down the street without those parts. But we do it all the time. When we've got low micronutrient density, we're walking around, we just don't know it. So I suggest right away, that's one of the first tests I recommend. I know a lot of coaches will recommend right away, get your hormones tested. And yet I think micronutrients needs to come first, because you may be able to help yourself with your hormones if you have the right micronutrients. So I think that's a big one. And I've opened the door for trying a lot of things. So C60 among them, and you do your due diligence. But one of the places where I find my audience is curiously just wanting to be all of a sudden a science geek, and yet they'll pull junk food, from the store shelves and not twice about that. So I think we really got to look at, where are you willing to experiment and who's behind it? Is there a voice you can trust? I think that's important. And then look at the pros and cons and test for yourself.
That's great advice. So, Debra, will you tell us how people can get in touch with you? And I want to tell us about programs and the offers and everywhere that people can find you, because we're going to pop up all your links here while you're talking.
Great. Okay. So we're at Flipping 50. So that's all words spelled out.com. That's the website where you can find blogs, podcasts. You can find what we call Flipping 50 TV, which is 39 episodes, where somebody probably had the problem you have right now, and you may be able to find an episode where I actually break down what is the answer. If you need a start, you need a restart, or what you're doing right now is not working. I find those are the three buckets where somebody is really ready to try something new. I have what I call the 5-day flip. So it's 5 very short workouts. You can do it at home. I do them with you from my living room. That is flipping50.com/5, the number day flip, no spaces between it. And the point is to convince yourself that doing less actually does give me more energy for the rest of the day. It doesn't wipe me out, and that I can do this. If I can do it for 5 days in a row and I'm feeling good, chances are you're going to continue. So there's that. For social media, I'm on Flipping 50 TV everywhere, Facebook, Instagram, and there's a tremendous vault and library on YouTube waiting for you. Some Q&As, some exercise videos. And throughout the year, you'll find, if you're visiting Flipping 50, we do some launches. I like starts and stops. Like to bring people in and have women start in a community. So we have different programs going on throughout the year. So stay tuned, follow us on social, and you'll see all those.
It sounds so exciting. A couple questions. How much does the 5-day flip cost?
Cost your time for 5 days, costs nothing. So you're just coming in to try it. So it's an opportunity to say, could I listen to her every day? Could I really do that?
I love it. So it's free. That is amazing. And then, Debra, what about this? Because I know this is an issue that stops people from progressing on this journey. And that's, I'm sore. I've started to lift these weights. They're super freaking heavy. I feel sore for the next 2 to 5 days, and maybe I don't want to do it anymore because I'm so sore. What kind of advice or feedback or recommendations do you have for people who have that mindset and they know they would benefit from getting out of it, but they hurt too bad?
Yeah, it's a great question and valid. So a couple of things. I think when you have the right program, when you have the right workout, you may notice muscles you haven't used for a while. You may have that little wake up call that, okay, I noticed this, but you should never be so sore doing a program that you can't sit down, you can't go up or downstairs without pain. That means that the micro tearing in those muscles has been tremendous. And I will promise you, there are programs out there that are doing that. There are trainers out there who probably feel pressure and frenzied to get you results right away. And they're almost instigating that, but you won't find it at Flipping 50.
Okay, great. And then I'm just curious. I've heard this from other people that like the number one best exercise that you can do if you're going to pick one thing to do are lunges or squats. What's your thought process around that?
Well, they are some of my favorite. So in terms of lower body exercises and just total body exercises, they're your major muscle groups. They're the largest ones in your body. So they are going to give you the most ROI for metabolism. And they are, let's face it, if you're walking around, you're using that for locomotion. It makes everything easier. So less fatigue, more strength. Not everybody can do them. So we really focus on giving good cues. So if I can pat myself on the back, one of my special sauces is, I think, answering questions before someone knows to ask them. So I cue ad nauseum, where you need to have your weight, where you don't want to have the weight, where your shoulders might have sneaked up to your ears, or where instead of on your heels, the weight is shifted to the balls of your feet, where you will feel it in your knees as opposed to in your bum. So form technique, very, very important for us. And if there's an exercise you absolutely can't do when you've had all those cues, there's a half a dozen that you can. that will still find that muscle group for you. So it may not be that squats or lunges are going to be your friend, or even that a variation will, but there is another exercise that you can do that will serve those muscles in you.
Okay. And do you have any programs that focus on this lower body, on the lower body
I
muscles?
don't have ones that focus exclusively on lower body, but I will tell you about lunges. So we do a freebie called, you can go to flipping50.com/lunges, because it is the number one most problematic exercise. And every woman thinks she needs to do it or knows she should because of the metabolism boost, but many have trouble with it because of their knees or their hips or lower back. So I did a short little series that also is free. So in that, you'll find, try it this way, use these cues. Now let's see if this feels better. If not, I give the next step. Here's a substitute. And then I gave a couple more substitutes. So no matter who you are, you'll find something there. And I mix it up. So I'm a total body girl. So I know a lot of people will have you do a split routine, or you may be doing that. Here's why I don't go there. And it's because the advantage of a total body workout gives you about 8 times the metabolism boost that just using one body part does. So even if you splice and dice and say, well, if I do 4 days, even with lesser metabolism, won't that work? It's one of those advantages where you want the whole. This is where 1 and 1 doesn't necessarily make 2. So you can't have this little boost and a little boost and a little boost. We need this muscle protein synthesis that comes also from strength training as well as high protein. And if we can use the two together, even better. But women are more prone to adrenal fatigue. So if we can have them lift weights just twice, total body, and rest and recover in between, you're going to feel fresher, you're going to feel stronger, you're going to feel less soreness if you're doing it every day, and you're going to get better results.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This has been so very informative. Do you have any final kind of parting words of wisdom for women over 50 who are knowing that they want to embark upon this journey, but maybe haven't started yet?
Never too late. That I think is the biggest thing. We know that women into their 90s, mid 90s, can begin a strength training program and gain strength. By 90, it's probably a little bit harder to gain lean muscle mass. You may be less concerned about your metabolism at 95 anyway, but don't wait till then, because your 95 will look very different if you start today.
Very cool. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time and all of the wisdom that you shared with us today. If you guys enjoyed this content today, please like it, share it, and subscribe, and send to a friend who could benefit from this information. If you'd like to try Carbon 60, visit us at shopc60.com, and you can use the coupon code TheC60Show for 10% off your first order. Thank you so much, Debra. Great to see you, and we'll talk to you guys very soon. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.